My name is Selena Hart, and at 28 years old, I never imagined my greatest battle would be against the very people who shared my blood. It began on an ordinary afternoon that turned into a war for my grandparents' legacy. I had just returned from a client meeting when my parents and younger brother appeared at the front door of my grandparents' estate. Their smiles were too wide, too rehearsed. My father held a folder as though it were a weapon. "We've already had the house signed into my name," he announced. "You'll need to be out by Friday." The audacity should have crushed me. Instead, I felt an almost chilling calm. "You really believe I would let that happen?" I replied softly. The silence that followed was heavy, their smug grins faltering for the first time. When they returned later with movers in tow, expecting me to have crumbled, they found me waiting on the porch. But I wasn't alone. And the look on their faces when they realized who stood beside me was priceless. Yet to understand why I had gone to such lengths, why I had already prepared for this storm, you need to know the history of how betrayal became the rhythm of my family. The story doesn't begin with greed. It begins with love. The kind of love that raises a child when her parents walk away. The kind of love that teaches patience, loyalty, and sacrifice. My grandparents gave me that. And it was precisely that love I had sworn to protect no matter the cost. What my parents never realized is that their schemes didn't scare me. They awakened something stronger. A resolve forged in years of abandonment and quiet observation. And so, when they thought they had already won, I was only just beginning to fight. But the real war hadn't even started yet. My grandparents Henry and Ruth Hart were my entire world from the time I was 5 years old. My parents had abandoned me under the pretense of chasing careers in another state. The truth? They were chasing freedom. Freedom from responsibility, from the weight of caring for a child. They left me with Henry and Ruth, promising visits that came twice a year at best. Christmas was their favorite time, not for family but for the gifts and money they hoped to extract. Each time they returned, their hugs were exaggerated, their smiles forced, and the questions predictable. "How are Grandpa's investments?" "Still doing well." The visits always ended with requests for loans that were never repaid. Henry and Ruth never complained. They raised me in their old colonial home in Maplewood, New Jersey, a house that had been in the Hart family for 3 generations. To outsiders it was worth millions. To me it was simply home, the place where I learned what it meant to belong. Every morning the scent of Ruth's baking filled the air. She would call up the stairs, "Wake up, little scholar," long before I ever considered law school. Henry took me fishing at the nearby pond, never once losing patience as I tangled my line again and again. In the evenings we'd sit in the library, books in hand, sharing passages that spoke to us. Those weren't just quiet moments. They were the foundation of who I became. From them I learned honesty, hard work, and responsibility. "Your word is your bond," Henry used to say. "Break it and you've lost something no amount of money can buy back." My parents never taught me those values. They taught me something else entirely, that greed could hollow out love and manipulation could replace genuine care. It was a lesson that would one day fuel everything I did. And soon their betrayal would force me to put that lesson into action. My relationship with my biological parents, Marcus and Elaine, was brittle at best. By the time I was old enough to understand, I realized they weren't incapable of parenting. They simply chose not to. Then there was my younger brother Victor, 7 years my junior. If I was invisible to them, Victor was their golden child. He grew up in their world of schemes and shortcuts, learning early how to twist words and play the victim. By his teens he had already mastered their brand of entitlement. I remember the first time Ruth suggested, "Maybe Victor should come stay with us too." She said it after a particularly disastrous visit, during which Victor had stolen cash from my drawer and lied about it. But Marcus and Elaine refused. He was their son, their chance to do it right this time. Except they didn't. They simply molded him into a mirror of themselves. As Henry and Ruth grew older, Marcus began calling more often, always under the guise of concern. "How's Dad's health holding up? What about the will? Any new advisors?" The words were wrapped in feigned affection, but I could hear the hunger behind them. Elaine sent links to retirement communities, suggesting the house was too much for 2 aging people. Whenever I walked into a room, their hushed conversations ended abruptly. It was clear what they wanted. Meanwhile, Ruth and Henry continued to pour everything into me. Books, museum memberships, educational trips. They didn't spoil me with luxuries. They invested in my future. At 16, I got a job at the local library to help with bills. They insisted it wasn't necessary, but I saw the strain: medications, property taxes, endless costs of aging. I promised myself then that I would repay their sacrifices, that I would protect what they had built. I had no idea how soon I would need to keep that promise. And when I finally did, it nearly tore me apart. As the years passed, Henry and Ruth's health began to show cracks that even their resilience couldn't hide. Henry suffered heart troubles that required surgeries, while Ruth slowly slipped into the early fog of memory loss. I balanced high school with caregiving, turning down scholarships to faraway universities so I could remain close. I chose a local college not because it was easy, but because love doesn't calculate convenience. It sacrifices. The night before my high school graduation, I sat beside Henry on the porch swing. He rested a hand on my shoulder, his breathing uneven, yet his eyes sharp. "Promise me, Selena," he said. "No matter what happens, you'll always protect this home. This house carries more than bricks and wood, it carries us." I nodded, though the weight of that promise pressed heavily on my young shoulders. When graduation day came, Ruth sat smiling in the front row, confusion flickering across her face between bursts of pride. Henry, frail in his wheelchair, insisted on wearing a tie and polished shoes. My parents? They didn't come. A text from Elaine that morning read, "Car trouble, sweetheart. We're so proud." I didn't bother to reply. That day, while the audience applauded, I felt both triumphant and abandoned. Henry and Ruth's pride filled me with warmth, but the absence of my so-called parents left a cold emptiness. Afterward, we celebrated at Henry's favorite Italian restaurant. He raised a trembling glass of water. "To Selena," he declared, his voice breaking. "The finest granddaughter and the finest lawyer this state will ever know." I laughed through my tears. But even then, a small voice whispered inside me, "You'll need that law degree sooner than you think." And I had no idea how prophetic those words would be. Law school was relentless. While others partied on weekends, I spent mine shuttling Henry to cardiology appointments and Ruth to memory clinics. By day I studied case law. By night I measured out prescriptions and read aloud from books Ruth still loved but often forgot midway through. One case I studied changed everything. An elderly couple in town lost everything when their son convinced them to sign over power of attorney, then drained their accounts dry. The betrayal devastated them more than the money. That story burrowed into me like a thorn. My professor, Dr. Karen Willis, once said during a lecture, 70% of elder financial abuse comes from family members. The greatest predator isn't a stranger. It's someone sitting at their dinner table. Her words shook me because deep down I already knew she was right. I began researching irrevocable trusts, iron shields that could protect assets from manipulative hands. As I read, my family's patterns echoed louder and louder in my head. The fake concern, the whispered questions about wills, the sudden visits when Ruth's memory slipped. It all fit together like jagged puzzle pieces. 2 weeks after I graduated, I booked an appointment in secret with Naomi Klein, an elder law specialist. She studied my grandparents' finances, her brows furrowing. "Your instincts are spot on," she told me. "This isn't hypothetical. Your father is circling. We can establish an irrevocable trust, but they'll have to agree willingly." That night I sat Henry and Ruth down. My hands shook as I explained what I'd seen: their son's sudden interest in property values, the phone calls, the pressure. At first Henry's face hardened. "Marcus would never do that. He's still my boy." I pulled out the email I'd found on Henry's computer. An inquiry Marcus had sent to a realtor about the house's market value. Ruth began to cry. Henry's shoulders slumped. "Show me the papers," he whispered. That was the night I truly became their protector. The process was grueling. Meetings with attorneys, financial advisors, and bankers filled our days. Piece by piece, the Hart family trust took shape. The estate, the house, the investments, all transferred under its protection. My grandparents retained full control during their lifetimes, but after they were gone, I would serve as trustee. Secrecy was crucial. Not even their closest friends knew. To outsiders, nothing had changed. But I slept easier, knowing the walls around our legacy had been fortified. 6 months later, the unthinkable struck. Henry was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. The doctor's words fell like a hammer: 3 to 6 months. That same week, Marcus and Elaine began calling daily, visiting weekly, pretending to care. Victor even quit his job at a local auto shop to help. But help meant rifling through drawers, taking photos of jewelry, and whispering with my parents in corners when they thought I wasn't listening. One night as I fetched Henry's medication, I overheard them in the garden. "Once he's gone we move fast," Marcus hissed. "Ruth's mind is slipping. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her." "And Selena?" Elaine asked. "She's green. A brand new lawyer with student loans. We'll toss her a token share and threaten her with litigation. Who'll believe her over us, the real children?" My blood ran cold. Victor chimed in, suggesting which antiques would fetch the highest price. I stumbled back inside, clutching Henry's pills like they were lifelines. My worst fears had been confirmed, not imagined, not exaggerated. They were vultures circling. That night, Henry gripped my hand with surprising force. "Promise me you'll protect her," he whispered, nodding toward Ruth. "Protect this house. This isn't just property. It's our history." I swore it through my tears. 3 days later, Henry slipped into a coma. And by morning he was gone. Henry's funeral was small, exactly as he would have wanted. A few neighbors, old friends, and his favorite fishing buddy gathered under gray skies. As I stood at the podium, I tried to hold my voice steady. "He taught me that wealth isn't measured in money but in love shared," I said, scanning the faces. "My parents and Victor? They arrived late, dressed like they were going to a cocktail party, and left before the last hymn finished. As we laid him to rest, Marcus pulled me aside, his eyes cold. "When will the will be read?" he asked, as though Henry's body wasn't even in the ground yet. My stomach turned, but I said nothing. Ruth clung to me afterward, her memory faltering but her grief sharp. Some days she would ask when Henry was coming home, and each time I gently reminded her he was gone. Watching her heart break anew each time nearly destroyed me. I hired a kind home aide named Marjorie to help when I had to be at court. Evenings were spent in rituals, watching Ruth's favorite old films, flipping through photo albums, reading aloud the same stories Henry used to. It gave her fleeting moments of clarity. But my parents didn't see her fragility. To them she was an obstacle, or worse, a signature waiting to be exploited. The phone calls came again, sly questions wrapped in false sympathy. "How's Mom doing? Is she remembering things clearly?" Each call reminded me that the war wasn't over. It was only beginning. And when Ruth's health took a sudden downturn 6 months later, I knew they would descend like wolves. I just didn't expect them to arrive so quickly. Pneumonia struck Ruth like a storm. For weeks I read Jane Austen by her bedside, her frail hand gripping mine. On her final night she had a rare moment of lucidity. She squeezed my fingers. "Selena," she whispered, confusing me at first for Elaine. "I am proud of you, you're nothing like them." Her eyes softened. "Protect our home." And then she slipped back into sleep. By dawn she was gone. I buried her beside Henry, the family plot shaded by ancient oaks. My parents didn't bother to come. Only a sterile bouquet arrived with a secretary's signature. I wasn't surprised, just hollow. For 2 weeks I wandered the halls of the house in silence. Every corner whispered with memory. Henry's laugh echoing from the library, Ruth's humming in the kitchen. Grief was heavy, but so was resolve. I would protect what they entrusted to me. Then came the knock. When I opened the door, Marcus, Elaine, and Victor stood there with carefully crafted grief on their faces. Elaine pulled me into a stiff hug. "We came as soon as we could." Marcus patted my shoulder with mock solemnity, his eyes already darting around the foyer, cataloging valuables. Victor smirked. "This place is bigger than I remembered," he said, like a buyer evaluating property. I let them in, offered coffee, and listened as their condolences quickly turned to talk of inheritance. "A house this size is too much for you alone," Elaine purred. "We should help you sell while the market's hot." Marcus leaned in. "And naturally, everything should be divided fairly among family." I smiled politely, but inside my stomach churned. Because I knew what was coming next, and it was far uglier than words over coffee. They stayed 3 days, prowling like predators in familiar territory. I caught Elaine rummaging through Ruth's jewelry box, Marcus measuring rooms with his phone, Victor whispering questions to Marjorie about bank accounts. One evening I stepped onto the porch for air and overheard Marcus on the phone. "The comps are at least 3.5 million, he bragged. "We just need to move fast once we gain control." My chest tightened. Later, snooping through Victor's laptop, I found searches. How to contest a trust, proving undue influence, inheritance lawyers near me. The next morning I confronted them over breakfast. You all seem very interested in the estate, I said evenly. Anything specific you're looking for? Marcus flushed, then recovered with a smirk. Just trying to help. It's a lot for someone so young. Elaine nodded like a bobblehead. We want to make sure everything is fair. Victor added the dagger. Grandma and Grandpa might not have been clear-headed in their last years. I forced a smile. Thank you for your concern. I have everything under control. They left later that day, promising to be back soon. As their car pulled away, I exhaled in relief. But then I saw it. Marcus's folder left sitting on the counter, forgotten. Curiosity overcame me. I flipped it open. Inside were copies of documents, a supposed old will naming Marcus sole heir, and a deed transfer with Henry and Ruth's shaky signatures. My heart pounded. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was naive. But they had underestimated me. Because the fight was about to get very real, and this time I wasn't fighting alone. The folder shook in my hands as I examined the so-called documents. The signatures were clumsy imitations, the ink smudged, the formatting amateurish. Yet to an untrained eye or a desperate buyer, it might look convincing enough. That was their strategy, to intimidate me with paperwork they hoped I wouldn't question. That night I called Daniel Ross, a colleague from my firm who specialized in fraud cases. Bring me copies, he urged. If these are what I think, your parents aren't just scheming. They're committing felonies. I scanned the documents and sent them over. Within hours, Daniel confirmed my suspicion. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft. You're in a stronger position than you realize, he said. But you need to prepare. They won't back down easily. The following morning I met with Naomi Klein, the elder law attorney who had helped me establish the trust. Her calm steadied me. Selena, the trust is ironclad. No will, fake or real, can override it. But you must be vigilant. They may try to force Ruth's signature retroactively, or fabricate more papers. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I changed the locks, installed cameras at every entry point, and stored the trust documents in multiple locations. One with Daniel, one with Naomi, another encrypted in digital storage. By Thursday night I sat on the porch swing where Henry once read to me, the folder of forged papers in my lap. They won't take this from us, I whispered into the dark. The house creaked around me as if in agreement. I thought I was ready for whatever storm they planned. But nothing could prepare me for the way they chose to strike. Because when they came back, they didn't just bring lies, they brought an army. Friday morning dawned deceptively calm. The sun painted the garden in gold, the same garden where Henry once taught me to plant tomatoes. I dressed in a navy suit, Ruth's pearl earrings brushing against my neck, a reminder of the strength she passed down. By 8:30 my team had assembled. Daniel arrived first, carrying coffee and a reassuring nod. We've got this, he said. Naomi followed with a notary, and finally Marjorie came, her arms full of pastries and nerves. I'll stay out of sight, but I'll testify if needed, she promised. At 11:45, right on cue, a black SUV pulled up, followed by a moving truck so large it rattled the windows. Neighbors peeked from porches, drawn by the spectacle. Marcus stepped out first, wearing a suit that looked borrowed, confidence plastered across his face. Elaine emerged next in oversized sunglasses, her expression tight. Victor bounded out last, phone in hand, already recording as though victory were guaranteed. 2 men climbed down from the moving truck, looking uneasy. I stayed seated on the porch swing until they reached the steps. Then I stood, the folder of genuine trust documents in hand. You're right on time, I said evenly. Marcus waved his own folder high. We have the legal documents giving me ownership. I hope you've packed. Elaine added syrup to the poison. We even brought movers to make this easier for you. I didn't flinch. Before you step further, you should know this property is under audio and video surveillance. Everything you say or do will be recorded and witnessed. They froze, exchanging nervous glances. But Marcus quickly recovered, sneering. That won't change a thing. I smiled faintly. It changes everything. Because they had no idea who was waiting just behind that door. The front door creaked open behind me. Out stepped Daniel, Naomi, the notary, and Marjorie, all calm, professional, and armed with paperwork that dwarfed the lies in Marcus's folder. The color drained from Elaine's face. Even Victor lowered his phone, uncertain now that their ambush had an audience. "Mr. Hart," Daniel said pleasantly as though greeting a client. "I'm Daniel Ross, attorney for the Hart Family Trust. I believe you were about to accuse your daughter of fraud. Please continue. We're recording for the court." Marcus sputtered, his bravado faltering. "This is ridiculous. I have documentation." "Forged documentation," Naomi cut in smoothly, holding up the injunction we had filed the day before. "And if you attempt to submit those anywhere, you'll be committing a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison." Elaine's mask slipped. She stepped forward, her voice pleading now. "Selena, honey, let's not drag outsiders into this. We're family. We can work this out privately." My chest tightened with a familiar ache, but I forced steel into my tone. Family doesn't abandon a child at 5. Family doesn't plot in gardens about stripping a widow of her home. Whatever you are, you stopped being family a long time ago. Victor's face flushed. "You think you're better than us? You're nothing without this house." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Their voices spilled into the spring air, the secret recording of their conversation about exploiting Ruth's dementia and cutting me out. Neighbors gasped. Even the movers looked appalled. Marcus went pale. "That's illegal," he shouted. "Perfectly legal," Naomi replied. "And admissible." As if on cue, police cars rolled up, lights flashing. Concerned neighbors had called when the shouting began. Officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts. And in that instant Marcus's empire of lies began to collapse. But I knew even cornered animals still bite. The officers approached slowly, their eyes scanning between me, my legal team, and my family. One of them, a tall man with a kind face, asked, "Is there a problem here?" Before I could speak, Marcus puffed out his chest. "Yes, officer. My daughter is refusing to vacate property that rightfully belongs to me. I have the papers right here." He thrust his folder forward with shaky hands. The officer accepted it but raised an eyebrow as he flipped through. "These look unofficial," he muttered, glancing toward Daniel. "Because they're forged," Daniel said calmly, producing our trust documents, court injunction, and notarized statements. "This property belongs to the Hart Family Trust. Selena Hart is the legal trustee." Elaine's voice sharpened. "You can't just take her word for it. We're his parents. That house belongs to the trust," Naomi cut in. "And attempting to file fraudulent documents is a felony. I'd strongly advise against continuing down that road." The officers nodded, visibly unimpressed with Marcus's theatrics. One returned the forged papers to him without a word. Victor finally lost his composure. "This is insane. You can't do this to us. We're family." The neighbors watching from across the street shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke in their defense. Everyone had seen enough to know where the truth lay. The mover stepped forward awkwardly. "Sir, are we moving anything or not? We're on the clock." Marcus's face burned red. No, not today," he stammered. I exhaled slowly, but I didn't relax. Because I could see it in his eyes. Retreat wasn't surrender. It was only the beginning of his next attack. That evening, after they left in a storm of curses and humiliation, I sat on the porch swing where Henry once sat. Relief washed over me, but so did dread. Marcus wasn't done. Sure enough, the voicemails began. At first, Marcus's tone was syrupy. "Selena, let's be reasonable. We're family. Share the estate and we'll avoid trouble." Then came Elaine's messages, alternating between guilt and scorn. "What would your grandparents think of you keeping everything for yourself?" By the third day, Marcus was snarling into the phone. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'll drag you into court until you're broke. That house is mine." I saved every voicemail. Every threat. Naomi and Daniel convened with another attorney, Sophia Grant, who specialized in estate litigation. She examined everything. "Their strategy is smoke and mirrors," she said. "But they'll likely escalate. We need to prepare for a lawsuit, or worse, a smear campaign." He was right. Within a week, Victor posted a rant on social media, accusing me of manipulating two confused old people and stealing the family legacy. He tagged distant relatives and neighbors, painting himself as the victim. At the same time, Marcus began visiting neighbors, knocking on doors, spinning tales about me being unstable. Some listened politely, but most shut their doors. They had known Henry and Ruth for decades. They had known me. Still, the whispers hurt. My parents' betrayal was no longer private. It was public, a stain spreading through the community. I looked at the home Henry built, Ruth's roses blooming in the garden, and felt rage settle into my bones. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be the kind they expected. Thursday night I barely slept. By Friday morning my house was fortified. Cameras recording every angle, locks replaced, documents secured in multiple places. My team, Daniel, Naomi, Sophia, and Marjorie, were ready. Even the police had flagged the property for immediate response. At 11 a.m. the SUV returned. No moving truck this time, just Marcus, Elaine, and Victor, their faces tight with determination. They walked up the path as though the house already belonged to them. Marcus carried the same folder of forgeries. "This is happening whether you like it or not," he declared. "Be out by noon." I stood tall on the porch steps. "Before you do something you'll regret, you should know we've filed for an emergency injunction. And the trust is unbreakable. You're only digging your own graves." Elaine's voice wavered between anger and desperation. "Selena, stop this. We are your family." I laughed bitterly. Family doesn't circle like vultures around a deathbed. Daniel stepped out behind me, his presence commanding. "Mr. Hart, Mrs. Hart, you've already been warned. If you persist, we'll pursue charges for fraud, harassment, and defamation." For a moment, silence. Then Victor lunged forward, his face twisted in fury. "You don't deserve any of this. I'll burn this place down before I let you keep it." Gasps rippled from the neighbors gathering at the curb. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I looked Victor straight in the eye, my voice cold. "Say that again for the recording." His mouth opened, but the police cars screeched to a stop before he could answer. And as officers stepped out, hands resting on their holsters, I realized this battle was about to turn criminal. The officers approached with measured steps, their radios crackling faintly. Neighbors had spilled onto sidewalks now, watching the scene unfold like a live drama. One officer, a woman with sharp eyes, raised a hand. "What's going on here?" I opened my folder calmly. "This is my family attempting to force me out of a property that legally belongs to the Hart Family Trust. I am the trustee. They've been presenting forged documents and threatening violence." Before I could finish, Victor shouted, "She's lying. This house is ours. She tricked two sick old people into giving it to her." His voice cracked, high-pitched with desperation. The officer glanced at me, then at Daniel, who handed over the injunction and notarized trust documents. She studied them carefully. "Everything here looks legitimate," she said. Her partner leaned toward Marcus. "Sir, do you understand that presenting forged documents could result in criminal charges?" Marcus's face turned the color of spoiled milk. Elaine grabbed his arm, whispering furiously. Victor shifted from foot to foot, still fuming, his threats lingering in the air. "Sir, did you just say you'd burn this property down?" the officer asked Victor flatly. Victor froze, realizing too late he'd spoken too loudly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of neighbors. The officer's pen scratched across her notepad. "That's a criminal threat. I suggest you all leave, now, before this escalates further." Marcus clenched his jaw, glaring at me with eyes so venomous I shivered. "This isn't over," he hissed. But as the officers escorted them back toward the SUV, I knew he wasn't bluffing. They'd already shown what lines they were willing to cross. And I feared the worst was still coming. The following weeks were an exhausting blur. My parents bombarded me with letters. Some written by shady attorneys, others scrawled in Marcus's hand, filled with threats and venom. "You'll be ruined," one read. Another, "Courts can be bought, Selena. You'll lose everything." Victor doubled down on his smear campaign online. He painted himself as the heartbroken son robbed of his legacy, sharing edited photos and twisted anecdotes. Some distant relatives believed him. A few even messaged me asking how I could be so cruel. Each message was like salt in an open wound. But I had weapons too, evidence. Every voicemail, every forged paper, every witness testimony was cataloged, ready. My team built a fortress of documentation. Naomi reminded me, sunlight is the best disinfectant. The louder they scream, the more foolish they look when the truth comes out. One evening, as I reviewed files in Henry's old study, the house creaked in a way that felt wrong. I froze. Then I noticed footsteps outside. I moved quietly to the window, heart pounding. A figure lingered by the side of the house, fumbling with something near the basement window. I couldn't see clearly, but the shape was familiar. Victor. Fear spiked hot in my chest. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, whispering details. By the time headlights washed over the yard, the figure was gone, leaving only muddy shoe prints in the flower bed Ruth had once tended. The officer who responded shook his head. Looks like attempted entry. We'll increase patrols. But you need to be careful. People like this don't stop until they're forced. That night, I lay awake listening to every creak, every whisper of wind against the shutters. And deep down, I knew the next strike wouldn't just be at the house. It would be at me. Days later, I walked into my office at the firm to find Marcus and Elaine sitting in the lobby, their expressions rehearsed for sympathy. "We need to talk," Elaine said, her voice trembling with false vulnerability. I stared at them, every muscle tight. "This isn't the place." Daniel appeared at my side like a shadow. "Actually, it's the perfect place," he said. "Because here we're surrounded by lawyers and witnesses." Marcus bristled. "You think you're clever. But you won't win. We'll contest the trust in court, drag your name through the mud. People will believe us. You've lived off them your whole life. Who's to say you didn't manipulate them?" His words cut sharper than I expected. For a moment, doubt flared in me. Was that how others saw me? A dependent, not a protector? But then I remembered Henry's words. "Your word is your bond." And Ruth's steady advice. "Stand on your own 2 feet." I straightened. "Try it," I said coldly. "And you'll find I've prepared more than you ever imagined." Elaine's mask slipped. Her voice hardened. "You'll regret crossing us, Selena. We'll make sure you do." Security escorted them out, but their words echoed long after they were gone. That night, I reviewed everything again, reinforcing my case, my defenses, my resolve. Still, the attacks wore me down. Their presence lingered like a storm cloud over every moment. Even in sleep, I dreamed of papers, signatures, courtrooms filled with accusing eyes. But beneath the exhaustion was fire. Each threat, each attempt to break me only sharpened my determination. Because this wasn't just about an inheritance. It was about survival. And the next battle would drag us all into court, where their lies would finally face the light. The courtroom was cold, its silence broken only by the shuffle of papers and the measured voices of attorneys. My parents sat across from me, smug in their tailored suits, Victor smirking like a cat ready to pounce. They thought they had cornered me. They thought my grief would make me fragile. But I wasn't fragile. I was forged in their abandonment. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, asked to see the documents Marcus had been waving around for months. He handed them over with exaggerated confidence. I watched as her expression shifted from curiosity to something darker. "These signatures," she murmured, glancing at the real documents provided by Naomi. "They don't match." She tapped her pen against the desk. "And these notarizations, where are the witnesses? Where are the stamps? This looks sloppy, Mr. Hart." Marcus's face flushed, but Elaine jumped in. "Your Honor, surely you see our concern. Our daughter manipulated her elderly grandparents. She isolated them, kept us away." I couldn't stay silent. "Kept you away?" My voice rang through the room. "You abandoned me at 5 years old. You showed up only when you wanted money. Henry and Ruth raised me, loved me, trusted me. They put their legacy in my hands because you never earned it." The gallery buzzed. Even Victor looked uncertain for the first time. Daniel stepped forward, laying out every voicemail, every recording, every notarized document. Piece by piece, the lies crumbled. When the session adjourned, Marcus stormed past me, his voice a hiss only I could hear. "This isn't over. I'll destroy you if it's the last thing I do." I held his gaze. "You already destroyed yourself." But his words lingered, because deep down I knew he wasn't bluffing. The smear campaign intensified after court. Victor flooded social media with doctored photos and fabricated testimonies from supposed family friends. Elaine played the martyr in long posts, lamenting how I had ripped apart the family. But the truth had a way of pushing through cracks. Neighbors who had watched me grow up rallied around me. Marjorie testified about Ruth's clarity when signing the trust. Even the bank manager who had known Henry for decades submitted an affidavit about their intentions. Every lie they spun only seemed to highlight their desperation. So it took a toll. I found myself waking in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing Marcus's voice in my head. I double-checked locks, replayed recordings, scanned shadows outside the house. Grief and fear twisted together until I barely recognized myself. Dr. Parker, my therapist, leaned forward during one session. "You're not just grieving your grandparents, Selena. You're grieving the idea of parents you never truly had." Her words pierced me. Because she was right. I wasn't just fighting for the estate. I was fighting for the version of family I had always longed for but never received. Months dragged into years, the battles moving from courtrooms to silence as their cases were dismissed one after another. The trust held. The law held. I held. And yet, every time an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone or an envelope without a return address landed on my porch, my chest tightened. Because even defeated, predators still stalk. And I knew Marcus's obsession wouldn't vanish quietly into the night. It was nearly 2 years later when the letter arrived. No return address, just my name scrawled across the envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. But it wasn't Marcus. It wasn't Elaine. It was Victor. The letter was short, messy with smudges. "I'm sorry. They were wrong. I was wrong. I miss you." No demands for money. No mention of the house. Just regret. I sat staring at the words, my chest tight. For years, I had carried nothing but anger toward him. And now this. I drafted a response carefully. "Thank you for saying that. It matters." I didn't invite him back into my life, but I left the door ajar. Just enough to let the possibility of change breathe. Naomi cautioned me. "Be careful. Regret doesn't erase history." He was right. But part of me wanted to believe someone from my bloodline was capable of redemption. Still, Marcus and Elaine remained silent, their absence louder than any letter. I knew better than to expect reconciliation. They had chosen greed over love too many times. And yet, the silence unsettled me. Because silence in my family was never the end. It was always the warning before another storm. Despite the shadows of the past, life began to take on new shape. I renovated parts of the house, not to erase Henry and Ruth's presence, but to blend it with my own future. The library remained untouched, Henry's books still lined up neatly, his leather chair waiting as though he might return at any moment. Ruth's kitchen kept its warmth, though I added new appliances she would have adored. The most meaningful change was outside. I built a small stone bench in the garden beneath Ruth's roses with a plaque that read, "Your word is your bond. Protect it." Henry's favorite saying. It became my sanctuary, a place to breathe when the weight of memory grew too heavy. Professionally, I found purpose. I shifted my legal practice fully into elder law, helping families establish protections like trusts. Each client was a victory, each case a tribute to Henry and Ruth. I even started the Hart Legacy Scholarship, supporting students pursuing careers in elder protection. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was building. But grief is never linear. Some nights, I still woke expecting to hear Ruth humming in the kitchen. Some days, I swore I smelled Henry's cologne in the library. Their absence was a presence of its own, one I carried like a second skin. And though I had fortified my world, a part of me always glanced over my shoulder. Because even in growth, the fear lingered. What if they came back? Years passed. The estate flourished under my care. Neighbors became family, colleagues became friends. Slowly, I built the chosen family Henry and Ruth had always hoped I would. Then one autumn morning, as I sorted mail at the kitchen counter, I saw their names again. Marcus and Elaine. A legal notice this time. My stomach dropped. They were trying once again to contest the trust. This time through a new attorney, one bold enough to gamble on their lies. In court they looked older, thinner, their confidence cracked but not broken. Marcus spoke with the same venom. "She robbed us. Manipulated us. We deserve our share." But this time I was unshakable. My team presented years of evidence, recordings, affidavits, notarized trust documents, and the trail of failed lawsuits behind them. The judge's patience thinned. "Mr. and Mrs. Hart, this case is dismissed with prejudice. Do not bring it before this court again." Elaine burst into tears, not of grief but of frustration. Marcus slammed his fists against the table, red-faced. Victor wasn't there. As they were escorted out, Marcus turned one last time. His voice, though hoarse, still carried venom. "You'll regret this, Selena. Mark my words." I stood taller. No, Marcus. The only regret here is yours. But his eyes told me he would never stop regretting, and never stop hating me for it. After that final dismissal, the noise quieted. No more lawsuits, no more social media rants, no more late-night threats. For months it felt like I could breathe again. But peace didn't come easily. I had spent so long fighting, defending, bracing for attack that silence felt foreign. In therapy, Dr. Parker reminded me, sometimes the absence of chaos is the hardest adjustment. Your nervous system is used to war. It takes time to believe peace is real. I tried to lean into it. Holidays with friends, quiet mornings with coffee on the porch swing, laughter echoing in halls that had once only held grief. Slowly, I filled the house not with the weight of battles lost and won, but with the warmth of living again. Then one spring evening, I received a phone call from a number I hadn't seen in years. I hesitated before answering. Selena. The voice was weaker, raspier but familiar. Marcus. My heart stopped. I'm not well, he admitted. The doctors, they say it's cancer. I don't have long. But I thought maybe, his voice cracked. Maybe you could forgive me. I gripped the phone, torn between fury and compassion. The man who had spent decades trying to destroy me was asking for absolution on his deathbed. I closed my eyes, hearing Henry's voice in memory. Your word is your bond. But what did I owe to a man who had broken every bond? The choice was mine, and it would define how this story ended. I sat in silence after the call, the weight of Marcus's words pressing down like a stone. Forgiveness. A word that felt like both freedom and betrayal. Did I owe him forgiveness? No. He had abandoned me, betrayed me, tried to strip away everything Henry and Ruth built. He had threatened, smeared, and schemed until his lies collapsed around him. He had chosen greed over love again and again. But I thought of Ruth, her gentle hands on mine, whispering, stand on your own 2 feet, but don't let bitterness be the only thing holding you up. So I answered, my voice steady. Marcus, I don't hate you anymore. But forgiveness doesn't erase what you did. You chose your path. And I choose mine. I won't carry your sins any longer, but I also won't let you back into my life. There was silence, then a choked breath. That's fair, he said at last. And then the line went dead. I don't know if he found peace. I don't know if Elaine ever regretted or if Victor ever truly changed. What I do know is this: I survived them. I honored Henry and Ruth's legacy. I built a life from ashes and betrayal, rooted not in blood but in love, resilience, and chosen family. Now when I sit on the porch swing at dusk, the garden blooming around me, I don't feel haunted. I feel accompanied. By their memory. By their lessons. By the unshakable truth that family isn't who claims you. Family is who protects you. And in that truth I finally found my freedom.